Epstein dies of apparent suicide.
Conspiracies abound. Trump? Clinton?
Let's talk about it, y'all. Middle America. Well, look, anytime somebody dies by suicide, it's a tragedy. Sori and I are Christians, and so because we're Christians, that's the mandate: love your neighbor as yourself. However, Mr. Epstein was accused of heading up a vicious sex trafficking ring of underage girls. Now the media
says underage women.
Right. They've since corrected themselves.
Oh, have they?
Yeah, it's a very, very strange choice of words from the media. That's why you need Middle America.
Yeah.
And if those crimes that he was accused of are accurate, which obviously his death kind of makes it seem that way, then he was an utterly despicable human being and very terrible. But we don't believe it's a position of Christians to ever celebrate the death of anyone. The scripture says that God does not delight in the death of the wicked, but rather that the wicked should turn from their way and live. However, I think Christian or otherwise, this man, because this is still America, and you're still innocent until proven guilty. So a lot of people are reporting on this guy like it's an open and shut case that he did this stuff.
But it's not?
Well, look, he hasn't had a trial. This is a judicial process. You have a trial, and then you get the conviction or you get the exoneration. I'm being silly, but you guys know what I mean. So he hasn't been convicted of this in this particular issue. Now, he did take a plea deal years earlier that resulted in him only spending 13 months in prison. So he did take a plea deal to this earlier. So, basically his lawyer, the DA, the special prosecutor, or whatever it was able to kind of end around that deal in order to justify going after him. So my point in saying that is he looks pretty guilty. But I'm going to continue to say alleged because I still believe in the American process. People are innocent until proven guilty. Now, this man, like I said, has already taken a plea deal. I believe he took the plea deal in about 2013. So here we are. Okay, he was accused of he had his own island, because he's a billionaire. He had his own island where he kept a stable of young girls. I mean, it was nicknamed Orgy Island, allegedly. Yeah, I mean, crazy stuff with these little girls.
Oh my gosh.
But, I've got a daughter, the age of some of these girls, allegedly, that were involved. And what would happen is you'd have these rich and powerful people. I mean, you had, people from Saudi Arabia, people from Israel, obviously the American president, Prince Andrew was named. I mean, very, very powerful. And the picture is, it was this island where these very powerful men were able to procure these girls, and it was
children.
These children,
yeah.
and it's the guy. It's his island. He owns an island. I mean, how do you even police that? Very terrible situation. And he was to stand trial. And go ahead.
So these girls were just trafficked over there?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how he got them. I honestly haven't really looked into the details because, quite frankly, I had a debate about sex trafficking and the entire sex industry. You can check it out yourself. So I had to do a lot of research around that, and what happened to those women was the lives that they lived, and how hard women in the sex industry have to struggle and how they're treated.
Yeah.
It was just too much for me to have to do this and then look at this happening to little girls. It was hard enough to watch it happen to grown women as far as reading what they were going through.
Yeah.
And this is why I take the position I take. I do not believe that we should create systems where weak and vulnerable women, voluntary or otherwise, have their bodies exploited by rich and powerful men, or even men who have more capital than they do.
Rich and powerful women as well.
Sadat, correct. And so at some point, I'm almost kind of disgusted by the hypocrisy of our entire culture.
Oh, yeah.
Where we have pornography that features barely legal kids, and we have pornography that features, girls that just turned 18 on a Tuesday who are dressed up in pajamas with teddy bears and braces. Right. And this is a boom, millions and millions of dollars are made of this. And this is completely fine in our culture. But now this guy, I'm supposed to believe our entire culture is angry at the... Stop it. No. The entire industry is sick from top to bottom. The concept itself is sick from top to bottom.
Yeah.
All of us know.
Well, I think that what happens is when they've drawn the line and they said, well, I wouldn't be with a kid.
Right.
But if it looks like a child but it's a woman, then it's okay, which is just crazy. But, I think that that's, the line that they've drawn in their head. So they can, the whole thing is wrong, but because they're not doing that thing, they can say, okay, that's terrible what he's doing.
Right, because there's a technicality. The girl turned 18 on a Tuesday, so now she's a full-grown woman. Even though they're presenting her as a little teenager, it's still okay because technically she's 18 years old. Mm-hmm. And that means you're on a completely different island from this guy and his compatriots. I'm sorry, I don't buy it. So I haven't really looked at the gory details of Mr. Epstein and what he's accused of for that reason, because I just can't. It was, like I said, it was hard enough watching what happens, reading and doing the research as to what happens to grown women to see that happen to young girls. Okay, and which explains why the media originally was reporting this as underage women, and people were outraged. Why? And the media's like, oh, that's right, I've got to play along and act like we're outraged about this. Yeah. When in reality, I'm just not buying it. Our larger culture is a lot sicker than we want to believe. We want to believe that this is a giant outrage across all the halls of America, but when you have people making millions and millions and millions of dollars by portraying recently turned 18 young women as 13 and 14 and 15-year-old girls, then I'm sorry, it's very hollow to me. Okay. Aside from...
and it's funny because, every time you say grown women, I'm like, can you stop? I don't want you to say grown... Because, there are women, but there are young women. It's not even when you're talking about, the grown women, you said, these are grown women, and then, the ones that we saw on those different things where they were portraying them as young, they were young women. They weren't, to me, it wasn't a mature 30-year-old woman.
45 years old.
Yeah, right. It was they were just...
Right, but that's one documentary, Hot Girls Wanted.
Yeah.
But there are other, I'm talking about the sex industry all over the world, not just pornography.
I see.
So the median age was 38 to something around. But your point is well taken. Is a lot of the women that populate the porn industry are very, very young girls. Hence the term Hot Girls Wanted. So. So there's that, and I understand a lot of people are going to be offended by it, and I don't care. I'm more offended for the girls than your sensibilities.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
But the good news is that at least in our country, we're still somewhat upset about this guy, and there was sort of a general consensus in our country. If he is guilty of this is terrible. And he was going to stand trial, and the Clintons were implicated. Trump was implicated as well because Trump knew him because, being a billionaire is a very, very small, group. And so Epstein was born in Brooklyn, so there's a New York connection, so of course they knew each other. So the fact that Epstein knows a bunch of powerful people doesn't bother me because it's the same thing with YouTube. We know YouTubers, and we're a very, very small community. People who consistently make YouTube videos. We're a very small community, so we're all going to run into each other. But there are some accusations that some of these powerful people knew him at more than just surface level. We'll get into that in a second. However, there's a lot of anticipation about what he was going to say, what he was going to testify for, because in this particular iteration, he was not going to be able to plead out like he did before, because the plea before basically made it so that he served 13 months and his co-conspirators basically were released. So he basically took a hit for the team. But this trial wasn't going to be like that. None of those deals were on the table. And then he ends up attempted to commit. He tried to commit suicide around July 23rd. Okay, so after an earlier incident in which he was found unconscious in his cell with marks on his neck, Mr. Epstein was put in the suicide watch unit July 23rd.
And how do you know that that's because he was trying to kill himself?
Well, we don't know definitively, but what happened was he had marks on his neck and he was unconscious. Mm-hmm. And so because of that, he was then placed on suicide watch. Mm-hmm. Now, we're kind of late to doing this video, and the reason for that is because we wanted to make sure, like with anything, that we're as accurate as possible. Right. Now, a lot of people are saying, how did this guy die while he was on suicide watch? That's crazy. There's a Republican, conservative comedian who, pulls out a roll of toilet paper and says, you cannot hang somebody with toilet paper, and that's all you can have in your room on suicide watch. Well, he's right. Mm-hmm. And actually, you can die with toilet paper. I'm not going to explain to you how, but it can't kill you. But you definitely cannot hang yourself with toilet paper. And so it's this big dramatic thing. Trump actually retweeted it. This comedian's video.
Really?
Yeah. Because it was this giant conspiracy theory and all that. The problem is, and this is why you're supposed to wait, even though you're going to get the hits if you release it immediately. This is why you wait. Mr. Epstein was removed from suicide watch days later at the request of his attorneys and daily psychological evaluations. So when he died, he was not on suicide watch. That's a myth. That's untrue. He was not on suicide watch.
How would his attorney have taken him off that?
Well, because presumably Epstein would say, I'm not suicidal, how did those welts happen on your neck? I don't know what the conversation was, but he wanted, because when you're on suicide watch, you're watched 24/7.
Oh, I know.
You can't have a blanket.
I just find it really suspicious that his attorney is saying, his attorney was part of the ones that are saying take him off suicide watch?
Well, I'm assuming that he told his attorney to say, tell these people to get me on suicide watch. This guy is a billionaire. He's used to a certain type of lifestyle. Yeah. Now he's in prison. He's being checked. He can't even have sheets. So it seems very logical to me that Mr. Epstein would have wanted to be off of suicide watch. Mm-hmm. That makes a ton of sense to me. A billionaire, who's in a horrible situation, now he can't even have a blanket. I can completely understand why he would say, get me off of this. And he's a billionaire attorney. He can afford an attorney, so the attorney, made moves happen. Now, this is the AG, Mr. Barr, says the following. I was appalled and frankly angry to learn of the jail's failure to adequately secure this prisoner, said Mr. Barr, speaking Monday at a conference for police officers in New Orleans. We are now learning of serious irregularities at this facility that are deeply concerning and demand a thorough investigation. So,
who's this guy?
This is the Attorney General.
Oh, okay. Yep. Okay.
So the Attorney General is like, wait a second, there's some serious irregularities here. Mm-hmm. Which is then contributing to the conspiracy theory. Yeah. Like, wait a second, this is pretty irregular. After Mr. Epstein, this is a Wall Street Journal, by the way. After Mr. Epstein was removed from suicide watch, he was downgraded to special observation status, which mandated that guards check on him every 30 minutes and that he have a cellmate, a person familiar with his detention set. So he went from suicide watch to special observation, which then makes it so that you get checked on every half an hour and then you have to have a cellmate. Mm-hmm. So you can still have your sheets and stuff, but it's kind of a halfway house. We will get to the bottom. But in the hours before Mr. Epstein's death, his cellmate had left and wasn't quickly replaced as required, the person said. The identity of Mr. Epstein's cellmate couldn't be determined. Mr. Epstein also wasn't receiving the mandated regular check-ins. So let's get this straight. This guy, he's a billionaire, and he's in serious trouble, and he's 66 years old, and if he's convicted of these crimes, he's done. That's the rest of his life is in prison. Mm-hmm. On 23rd July, he gets found unconscious with marks around his neck. he gets put on suicide watch. Then his lawyer convinces everybody that he doesn't need to be on suicide watch after psychological exams. He gets put in special observation status, where he's supposed to be checked on every half an hour, and where he's supposed to have a cellmate. And during the time when he died, his cellmate left.
He's unidentified.
Unidentified, wasn't replaced, and then there's a gap in the check-ins on Mr. Epstein, giving him enough time for him to off himself. So you can see where the conspiracy theorists are coming from.
Oh, absolutely.
Now, usually,
well, I think it like kind of like makes both possible.
What?
One is that somebody killed him, or one is that he killed himself.
Right.
Because nobody's around, so how can you say what happened?
Right. So there's three theories about him. One is that he's not dead at all, and that this is just,
That's one of them?
Yeah. It's like the Alex Jones, Rachel Maddow level conspiracy theory.
Really?
Right? Yeah. And the second one is that they knew he was suicidal, and they gave him enough space. I mean, and it's there. It's a Wall Street Journal. This is not, InfoWars. They gave him a space for the man to kill himself. And then the third one was that he was killed. The reason I don't believe that he was killed was because the initial suicide attempt, presumably, right, on the 23rd, he tried to kill himself on the 23rd, and then he got his lawyer to get him off the suicide watch. Now, if somebody's trying to kill you, you tell your lawyer, hey, publish to everybody that people out here trying to kill me. You wouldn't say, get me off a suicide watch. If somebody was in your cell trying to kill you, some stranger in your cell tried to kill you and strangle you, you wouldn't try to convince your lawyer to get everybody to get you out of suicide watch. So you would be saying, people are trying to kill me, we need to sue this place. But there was none of that in July.
Yeah.
Go ahead, what were you saying?
No, I see what you're saying. Because at first I was like, well, why would you want to leave that spot too? Because if you go somewhere else, you're going to be with somebody else that more likely you could get killed. But then I'm like, yeah, but no. If somebody made it into your cage, I was going to say, into your cell where you were on suicide watch, if somebody made it into there, like, you're not safe there. So, but I changed my mind after, because I'm like, okay, it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. Mr. Epstein's death demonstrates severe miscarriages of or deficiencies in inmate protocol. So a lot of people are like, wait a second here, this is convenient. It just so happens that there are these irregularities in protocol, and then this guy just so happens to end up dead.
Yeah. Multiple irregularities.
I believe that he killed himself, but that doesn't mean that there isn't a conspiracy, because you got a guy that's under some severe mental duress, and he's already demonstrated that he's willing to kill himself, and then you give the guy enough literal rope to hang himself. That's still a form of silencing him.
Yeah.
And the thing about Epstein is he's already demonstrated that he's willing to take those secrets to his grave, because he took the plea deal before to protect his friends. It doesn't look. Here are the facts. The facts are he was not on suicide watch when he died. Those are the facts. Now, I know it's very sexy to think, oh, he was, I've seen a lot of YouTubers talking about how he was on suicide watch and all that. He wasn't. Okay. Now, but do you still think it's a little bit mysterious? That,
I do.
That
I still do.
That
Yeah.
Yeah, and Trump is really It's a strange thing, he's retweeting these conspiracy theories and all that. And I get it. Epstein is a despicable human being if what he did actually happened, But it's almost as if, like, Trump doesn't realize that a person died. Like, why are you retweeting these conspiracy theories? Like, you're the president of the United States, and a man is dead.
Yeah.
And then immediately, the body isn't even cold yet, and you're cycling these conspiracy theories like a regular person. Like, that's the thing that really bothers me about Trump, is he can never comport himself
as
like he's an actual president.
Yes.
Agree or disagree with Barack Obama, the man was presidential.
Yep.
He was kind of above everything. And like Colin said, like, you don't want a president that's like you.
Yeah.
It is a ridiculous job. I was listening to Joe Rogan and Bernie Sanders talking, and Joe was like, is this even a job that can really be ran by a single person? You know, things were a lot simpler when the founding fathers were, you know, and Bernie said, no, that's why you have to have a cabinet and a team, and you have to listen to your team. And then Bernie said, that's why I will never, you know, communicate, you know, policy decisions via Twitter, blah, 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 blah. But it's just, it irks me. It's mind-boggling to me. Like, a man is dead, the investigation isn't there, and you're doing this cartoonish thing and retweeting a conspiracy theory. It's madness.
And it's not even, like you said, like, you don't want to have a president that's like you. I wouldn't even do that.
Oh, of
So
course.
it's
Right.
like, this is like...
Right. There were things...
something your baby brother would do. You know what I
Right.
mean? You're like, this really shouldn't be happening.
There were really provocative things that we could have reported on in this story.
Oh, I'm sure.
That I specifically left out because
Yeah.
I couldn't cooperate them.
Yep.
And it's like, I'm a punk kid who barely graduated high school on YouTube, and I have, you know, we have more journalistic integrity than the President of the United States. I just think it's mind-boggling to me that this is the state of our country.
That's not good.
This is the state of our country. I forgot which one it was. I don't know if it was Jefferson or somebody. Somebody got locked up for public intoxication, and he was like the Secretary of State or something at the time. Yeah. And it, you know, we were learning about it in global studies one time, and our teacher was talking about this is how awesome America is because everybody gets held accountable. You know, yeah, that's how it was back in the day. Not anymore, obviously. Okay, but. So there is that conspiracy theory. You can understand why a person would hold to the conspiracy theory because it's very freaking convenient.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Not so fast. This is a BBC. Here's the headline. Guards severely overworked at the time of Epstein's death. Now watch this. A hiring freeze by the Trump administration has left thousands of staff vacancies across the Bureau of
Where
Prisons.
are you reading this from?
Right there.
No, I see on the page.
From BBC.
Okay.
BBC is like the British version of CNN. I mean, it's, you know. So a hiring freeze by the Trump administration has left thousands of staff vacancies across the Bureau of Prisons, creating dangerous conditions for both staff and inmates, said Eric Young, president of the American Federation of Government Employees Council of Prison Locals, in a statement. The remaining officers are regularly forced to work 70 and 80-hour work weeks. 70 and 80-hour work weeks.
Jeez.
That's 16-hour days.
Yeah.
That's a 16-hour day. He also described a tactic to address the shortages called augmentation, which allows teachers, nurses, clerical workers, and other support staff to fill in for correctional officers.
What?
The low pay, understaffing, augmentation, and mandatory overtime have created an environment inside our prisons where something like this is even possible, he added.
Wow.
One of the corrections officers was reportedly on his 5th straight day of overtime shifts, while another guard had been forced to work overtime. Serene Gregg, president of the AFGE Local 3148, told the Washington Post newspaper, if it wasn't Mr. Epstein, it would have been somebody else because of the conditions at that institution.
Wow.
It was only a matter of time for it to happen. It was inevitable. Our staff is severely overworked. Ms. Gregg said she had long complained about the work conditions at the facility. The guards failed to follow several protocols leading up to Epstein's death, according to the New York Times. Mr. Epstein was reportedly left alone on Saturday after his cellmate was transferred. Okay. Well, now, conspiracy people, you have to contend with this. At this particular facility, you had augmentation happening, which is you take nurses, clerical, what does clerical staff even mean? Like a secretary at an office? Like, no disrespect to secretaries, you do important work, but I mean, as a correctional officer for a high profile case like this, a billionaire, really? Now, what happens, what she's saying is if it wasn't him, it would have been somebody else. And now the question becomes, well, how many of these people have actually done this and we're only finding out now because it's Epstein?
Yeah.
So to me, this is why you gotta pause before you jump on
Trump would have known that he did that, you know what I mean?
Did what?
What did it say? A hiring freeze by the Trump administration. Like, he would know probably that he was
I don't
part
know.
of the problem.
I don't know if you would know that.
Oh, really?
No, I have very, very little confidence that Trump would be aware of.
You don't think somebody
that.
would inform him after this guy died?
Well, I'm sure now he knows.
Oh yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like
I'm
he knows
sure.
that, and then he's posting all this other stuff to like get the.
But as I've said before, Trump is a master
Yeah.
at Twitter.
Yeah.
Because every single time he does something on Twitter, it's because he's hiding something else. It happened with Ilhan Omar. He posted the whole "Go Back Home" tweet, and then right after that, he blocked the Central Americans from refugee status, and then he posted the "infested the rats" thing. And while everybody's crying over that, he reinstituted the death penalty, him and Barr, and now he's posting this conspiracy theory, and nobody's holding Trump accountable for the fact that he created the situation that generated this. You got nurses and doctors. And not doctors. You got nurses and stuff, people who are trying to make some extra cash, filling in. This is bananas. Now, in this particular situation, one of the officers was on his 5th straight day of overtime, and another guard had been recently forced to work overtime. And I, as a person who's been in situations where I've had to force people to work overtime, when you force somebody to work overtime, they don't do a good job because they're angry, and so sometimes they do piss poor work to get back at you.
And they're tired. You even if you're like not trying to be angry, you're still tired.
Right.
Basically, these people were just eating, sleeping, and working.
Exactly. I mean, again, you're talking 70 to 80 hour work weeks.
Think of how stressful it would already be like in that prison because of the shortage. And so everybody's on edge. You're going to have more situations you're dealing with. So you're going to have a harder time to fall asleep when you get home.
100%.
You're running on lack of sleep. That's a mess.
And then the stress of having a high profile guy like Epstein, I could completely see how a miss like that can happen. And again, with suicide, it doesn't take long. It's one of those things where they're probably at the lunch table in a fog and saying, hey, who's got cell 48? Oh, crap, let me go check. And it's too late. So I get the conspiracy theory, but this adds a little bit more context. I would say we've probably lost hundreds of people in the last 3 or 4 years probably due to this. But now it's coming into full relief because it's Epstein. And what's really tragic about the situation is that this is a root cause problem here. Whether or not, let's say conspiracy theory 2 is true, which is he was left alone so he could kill himself. This would have been avoided if we were staffed properly. Mr. Trump?
Yep.
And I know that Trump is not going to bring it up and make a big thing of it. And everybody's flying off the rails with this. And if you hold to a conspiracy theory about Epstein, even in light of this, I don't blame you. Like, Alex Jones and they're making the frogs gay or whatever, and the ant, like, whoo, you're crazy. Like, you're just crazy. Period. Somebody actually, Rachel Maddow with the, Russians are trying to freeze us out in Fargo. Somebody actually messaged me, no disrespect to you, brother, but that's crazy. That's madness. But if somebody's curious about Epstein's death,
a little bit over the top.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. If somebody's not buying the party line on Epstein's death, I can completely understand that. For me, I'm going to go ahead and apply Occam's razor here. What happened is the guy was suicidal. He was spoiled. He got his lawyer to get him into a degraded status. And then he took advantage of the fact that people were overworked. And this guy probably is a brilliant social engineer, probably befriended a couple of them and said, I'll be fine, don't worry about it. And it took about 5 minutes for him to end his life. I mean, that's my perspective on it.
Yikes.
You got a bunch of overworked people, you got a bunch of people who are not professionals at the job in there.
Yeah.
I just think that that's enough to where I say, okay, it makes sense that he would kill himself. One of the reasons that Trump retweeted it is because there's a giant conspiracy theory happening surrounding the Clintons, because people keep dying around the Clintons in these very strange, mysterious ways. And so, and now here's another guy who's connected to Clinton, and the idea is this guy had information that would finally and totally implicate Bill Clinton and crush him and destroy the Clinton legacy forever, and then he ends up dead. And so Mr. Clinton has put out a statement.
Oh, has he?
In a statement Monday, Mr. Clinton's spokesman, Angel Urania, said that Mr. Clinton took 4 trips on Mr. Epstein's plane between 2002 and 2003, each one to Europe, Asia, and 2 to Africa. The trips all included stops in connection with the work of the Clinton Foundation, Mr. Urania said, adding that Mr. Clinton's staff supporters in the foundation and Mr. Clinton's Secret Service detail traveled with him on every leg of the trip. So,
I don't believe anything that he has to say.
Well, Mr. Epstein had a plane. He had a private plane.
Yeah.
And so Clinton was doing a lot of humanitarian work with the Clinton Foundation. Okay, now there's some controversy around the Clinton Foundation. Okay, but again, it makes sense. Your billionaire buddy has a private plane, and he's willing to fly you all over the world. You're no longer the president. You no longer have Air Force One. It makes sense that he would do that. So he took 4 trips there. Okay, well. Flight records published by Gawker in 2015 suggested that Mr. Clinton took at least a dozen separate flights on Mr. Epstein's plane. A year later, Fox News reported that flight records showed President Clinton had flown at least 26 times on Mr. Epstein's plane. It was unclear how many individual flights were involved in each trip that Mr. Urania mentioned, and whether that may account for the discrepancy between the number he cited and what the flight logs show. Mr. Clinton's office did not immediately respond for a request for comment.
Really? I wonder why that is.
This is the New York Times, ladies and gentlemen. By the way, this is not you know, the New York Daily News. This is the New York Times is saying this.
Yeah.
So I mean that's obviously a problem. That's obviously a problem.
Yep.
And yeah, I mean it is kind of curious as to why Mr. Clinton is not commenting on that. There's also, I'm not going to say anything more about that. Well, there is the accusation, I'll say this, there is the accusation that Mr. Clinton actually visited Orgy Island, which was obviously denied vehemently by Mr. Clinton.
I would be willing to bet a lot that he went. And he's just lying.
Look. There's nobody. I don't think there's anybody who experienced the Monica Lewinsky situation, who saw Clinton look in the camera and say, "I did not have sexual relations with that woman."
Yep.
I don't think there's anybody that has seen that will look at Mr. Clinton and go, "Oh yeah, man, you're clean."
Yeah.
This is one of those situations where it's like we tell the kids, like if you make a pattern of something, even when you're innocent, people are going to assume that you're guilty. The reason I didn't read the other source was because I couldn't find it sourced in the in any mainstream.
Oh, really?
In any mainstream media. So there's a particular part of this that I'm purposely not including that I'll say at minimum sounds very damning for Mr. Clinton. So, but I'm trying to maintain some journalistic integrity here, so I'm keeping it to the major news outlets. And I understand that, you know, they're all working for the man, but the fact of the matter is, if Fox News thought it was credible, they would absolutely be screaming it from the mountaintops. So, it is what it is. We're not going to fall victim to publishing fake news as best as we can. So this is where we're at. A man is dead. He's not going to face justice in the human courts. Obviously, as Christians, we believe
and we're not going to hear his testimony.
He's going to face divine justice. We're not going to hear his testimony. That's correct. And you know, it's a tragic situation all around. I mean,
what happened to this island, and where are these girls now?
I have no idea. I'm assuming that the island is part of his estate, and so whoever was in his last one, he's got a wife. Or a girlfriend, which, by the way, his wife/girlfriend is also accused as being the main kingpin under him in trafficking these girls, which happens.
That's why I always put "and women" in there when you're saying it, because
yes.
Sad as it is.
And again, accused. So I'm assuming the island would go to Mr. Epstein's wife or whatever. So
fine, but what happens to all these girls? And you notice there's all this talk about him and his death, but I haven't seen anybody talking about where are these girls, what's going to happen to these girls, who is caring for these girls, what's going on.
Well, like I said, the source that I had, one of them's a grown woman now. So some of them have grown up. I mean, you think about it, if they were 12 and 13 by the time, in 2003, 2005, and they're grown women now.
Oh, he's been sitting in jail for a while.
No. What I'm saying is, like, the evidence that they had to indict him finally, materialized in the last 6 months.
Yeah.
But a lot of these girls at the time in the complaint are now grown women.
So his island wasn't happening recently? I was under the understanding that this was still going on.
What I'm saying is,
and then they caught
what I'm
him.
saying is the complaint and the women listed in the complaint are now grown women. I don't know anything about what's happening now on the island. You know what I'm saying? I don't know if there's like a stable of young girls on his island. I have no idea. I'm sure now, if there were, that's all done away with. I'm sure the minute that he got squeezed by the feds that he had contingency plans. People like that always do.
Yeah, probably right.
But what we do know is that this is happening all over the world. That's what we do know. And what I would say is, I think a lot of times we misinterpret the times. And a lot of people are just trying to act like this guy is an isolated incident and that we should have all this judgment on this guy. He's dead now, so he's not for us to judge. The question is, do we want to make life harder or easier for sex traffickers? And I would say we should make life as hard as possible for sex traffickers. Like I said in my debate, New Zealand opened up, legalized their sex trade for pimps, prostitutes, and johns. They decriminalized the whole thing. And they then swiftly became, as of last year, 2008, U.S. State Department published, a destination country for sex traffickers. So legalizing that completely made it a destination country for sex traffickers. I believe we should take the Nordic model, which decriminalizes the woman, but criminalizes the exploiters, the johns and the pimps. The exploiters need absolutely 100% to be criminalized. It's not going to stop sex trafficking, it's not, but it will definitely stymie it and make life way more difficult. Because I'll tell you something, what's saying that you can't dress up a 14-year-old and make her look like a grown woman? My sister looked like a grown woman at 15, and then traffic her over there to New Zealand. There'd be no way to protect that young lady. So I don't want us to miss the lesson here. The lesson is we need to make life as difficult as possible for sex traffickers, and we need to make it impossible for young women to be trafficked under our watch, whether or not they gave consent. Because this entire industry is just too ugly and evil for us to countenance it, and there's no way to manage it in such a way that women are never going to come out on the short end of the stick. They're 100% of the time going to come out on the short end of the stick here. And I know there's justifications and arguments and all that. What I'm saying is we shouldn't miss the lesson here. That's the lesson.
Yeah.
We're a sick society. God have mercy on this man's soul through Christ Jesus our Lord. That's what my buddy Mark posted. And I'm just repeating it because I'm thinking to myself, if I repeat it long enough, that will eventually seep into my heart for this guy. And again, we will never know definitively if he is innocent or guilty because the man didn't have his day in court. I mean, those are the facts. So, there's that. Love your neighbor.
Take care of each other.
Middle America.
We are the media.
Till next time, guys.